So the conversation you're about to watch is a conversation between an intern named Ray and I. Ray is an aspiring minister who's in the process of getting licensed and credentialed. And the purpose of this conversation was not to create any sort of division or encourage any kind of conflict or anything like that. But rather, the purpose of this conversation is hopefully to give insight and share some of the experiences that Ray and I have walked through. And the purpose is that hopefully the listener is encouraged to embrace someone within your own church of a different cultural background or maybe a different skin color. So the purpose is to promote unity within the church by sharing these experiences, not to divide. God bless. Hope it blesses you. Okay, so a week ago, was it a week ago?
Yeah,
we had a conversation by the front doors on the way out of church.
Yes.
We ended up being the very last two in the building, and we had a conversation that ended up being, I don't even know how we got on this.
Me neither.
But it ended up being about race, stereotypes, being minorities in a predominantly white church.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was a really good conversation because of the way we ended it. And I felt like we had enough similar experiences to where a lot of our answers or a lot of our solutions to issues of race in the church and not knowing how to talk to people of the opposite race, our solutions to that ended up being pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
So, to start, first of all, tell us who you are, where you're from, your blood type, all that stuff.
And I don't even know
Social
my blood
security
type.
number. You don't know your blood type?
I don't even know my social, man. My mama only knows that.
I know my social, but I don't know my blood type.
Oh, okay.
And I asked my doctor my blood type, and they were like, "Why do you want to know?" And I was like, "Because it's my blood type." And they wouldn't tell me. They wouldn't do the little test.
I was about to say, all I know about my blood type, they said it was rare, so I was like, I'm special.
Okay, tell me, start with your name, where you're from, and how you made it to this church.
So, my name's Ray. I'm from Hereford, Texas. How I made it to Woodlake is a funny story. So, we were church hopping. I'm a student at Oral Roberts University, and my friends and us, we were church hopping at the beginning of the semester, and we're going from church to church. Simple story short, my friends basically left me here. We showed up one time. They found out they didn't like it. So I showed up the next service, and I texted them like, "Hey, guys, where you at? Oh, we found out we don't like that church, so we're not going back."
Oh, my God. I kind of want to know who it is now, but don't tell me.
And so I kind of just got left there, and I was like, well, now I'm all alone.
Wow.
So
your first time coming into this church, what was the experience like? Were you just like predominantly white? What were your feelings?
So at first I was very like, I really don't care. This is what I've grown up in, so I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until actually recently to where I felt like maybe everybody's looking at me weird because I'm the only brown guy here. And I started thinking into my head of, well, maybe I'm not good enough to be here, or like all these things started coming into my head to where one day I was having a conversation with my mom, and she's like, "You've really never talked like that before. Like you've never really thought like you were less or whatever. So it's new hearing you talk like this," to where I even caught myself thinking, well, shoot, am I not good enough to be around here? There's other people better than me, this and that, to where I started thinking, well, maybe it's because of my skin color, this and that. I'm not making friends, or I'm not getting known. But just finding out, it was just people just didn't know how to come say hi, and plus my face is not the nicest face in the world, to where I tell people I just don't smile. Mom's like, you need to smile more. And
it's funny because for me, I'm different because first of all, I'm a pastor. I have to talk to people, and also I'm a black guy, so I'm like I can talk to literally anybody. But with you, I noticed like you look serious a lot of the time, but I'm like, I mean, I'm gonna talk to him anyway, like whatever. And the more I've gotten to know you, the more I've realized like you're a big jokester. Like you love playing like practical jokes on people. That just goes to show you again that
you have to get to know somebody, because you can't, not only can you not judge them based on the color of their skin, but you can't even judge them based on their countenance.
And it's so true to where so many times I've judged people just from the first 5-10 words that they tell me, and it's like, oh, they don't like me, or oh,
Yeah.
they thinking this. But to where more of the times I get to know them, I'm like, oh, you're actually really funny.
Yeah.
But you're just so dead serious half the time.
Yeah.
Or you're just monotoned half the time. It was in knowing that, like, you can't judge people just right off the back, but it's after you've got to know them 3-4 weeks, getting to have those normal conversations, and you're like, oh, you're good, or oh, maybe I need to watch myself with you, to where I've started learning that with people, to where I don't judge them right off the back, but I give them that benefit of the doubt, like, hey, maybe they're having a bad day, or something else is going on. I had met Pastor Jamie once, and so I told him my name and everything, and then the next time I came back, I had probably about 3-4 weeks. School got busy and hectic, and I came back slipping through the crowd, just coming in, sitting at the way top of the back of the sanctuary. Thought I could have, nobody noticed me, so I was like, all right, cool. I'm trying to slip through the front door, and Pastor Jamie grabs my arm and is like, it's good to see you, Ray. And it scared me how he remembered my name, but it made me feel like how he preaches that belonging and family.
Yeah, that was pretty much more or less the same experience we had. We were church hopping 2 years ago, and we came in, and it was a Wednesday night, and the first thing Jamie ever said to us was, ORU? You moved up here for ORU theology? You're finishing your degree? And I was just like, what in the world? Like, I've never even met you.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a really good job of connecting with people, so that's awesome. So I met you in class at ORU, systematic theology, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was it spring of 23 or was it fall of 22?
I think it was spring. It's fall of 22.
Fall of 22. And then I started seeing you here a lot more. And now, real quick, tell us what you do currently for the church.
So right now I'm one of the interns for the church, and basically what I do is Wednesday night curriculum for the Brotherhood boys, and then I help in the J High Sunday school. Mm-hmm. I'm one of the coaches. I'm the coach for the 11 o'clock service, the third service for the factory.
Yeah.
And basically the mule for everything else.
Yeah. Oh, I know all about that. So that was my first year here, was going from regular attender church member to intern. And I was a really old intern at the time. So everyone was like, why are you mid-30s and interning? But I just felt like the Lord opened the door for Elizabeth and I to do that. So that's what we did. I am really excited to talk about this, to talk about race, to talk about ethnicity, because for me as a minority and as a pastor, it comes up so much. Mm-hmm. I talk to so many minorities about how do I function within a predominantly white church. And I talk to so many white people, Caucasian people, whatever term we want to use, mm-hmm. about how do we interact with persons of color to not make them feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So I feel like I'm sort of a bridge a lot of times between these two demographics. Mm-hmm. So I want to know about you, where you come from. I want to know your upbringing, as far as, like, tell us what race you are, because you can look at you and assume certain things. So tell us what your race is, but then also I want you to tell us about your upbringing culturally, mm-hmm. because that's when we start to find out more of what you're like, is the cultural side of things and the ethnicity side of things.
Okay, well, the upbringing that I'm from it's a majority of Hispanic and white, Caucasian, whatever you want to call it, to where I am Hispanic. It's basically the mutt between Spaniard, Native American, Mexican, mix of everything. Yeah. To where people look at me, they think, well, you're black, or you're Samoan, or all these things. It's like, no, I'm landlocked. I've never been near the ocean.
Yeah. And when I met you, I was like, I tried to make an assumption and I couldn't, because mm-hmm. I was like, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to talk to him to figure it out. So I'm just not going to assume. So,
and that's one thing too, in my upbringing. My parents are Hispanic, to where basically the only thing I could say we have of the Hispanic culture was the matriarch, to where my mom was the center of it all, to where she held everything together.
Yeah.
And I mean, besides that, I was raised whitewashed. Everyone, all my friends were white.
And what you mean by that is
And
culturally,
to where
you were raised
and a
more
white
along lines with white culture.
to where it was just everything from how we talked, how we dressed. I mean, there was nothing saying like, "Hey, this is Hispanic." To where you come to our house, it looks like a regular house. There's no Mexican decal or anything to where it's just this is us, and that's how we were raised. To where I've had people tell me like, why do you talk a certain way? I said, well, it's from all the different cultures and all the different ethnicities I've been around, to where I pick up their slang, or I pick up something to where it's like, ooh, I like how that sounds. Right?
Yeah. And so with this, I think we need to dig just a little bit deeper into this, because this could be really eye-opening for certain people who would look at you or look at me and assume certain things.
Yes.
Looking at me, you wouldn't assume my mom's Native American, so I was raised on that side of the family. You wouldn't know that I love heavy metal. You would just probably assume I love rap, which I do. I love rap too. But looking at you, I would never assume cowboy. But I only picked that up through conversation with you and getting to know you. So tell me, like, paint a picture of Ray Morales as like a young kid.
So,
like, what are you wearing? What are you listening to? What are your favorite foods? Like, paint that cultural picture.
So as a kid, I mean, I love trains. Trains was a big thing for me. I wanted to be a conductor. And then I grew into that cowboy phase because the church I grew up in was a cowboy's church. So we were always around horses, cattle, all that stuff. So, and then one of our good friends, he was a cowboy.
Yeah.
And so I had my cowboy boots, my spurs, my chaps,
Nice.
cowboy hat, little cowboy vest.
That's awesome.
I mean, I would wear it all the time, to where I wanted to be a cowboy. And it just kept, that was what I wanted to be, to where people were like, hey, you can't be a cowboy, this and that. And then I was like, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to be a cowboy.
Yeah.
And to where I had that notion of like, when I get older, I'm going to buy a ranch. I'm going to raise cattle, have horses, all that stuff, the Texas dream. And
now that is kind of stereotypical Texas. That's the only stereotype here.
And so that was my big thing of, I just wanted to be that. But then growing older and getting to know, hanging around my dad more and everything, he wore polo shirts and all that stuff, to where it was like, okay, I want to dress like my dad now. Yeah. To where the culture now changed from cowboys to now what my dad was doing. So I wanted to look like my dad, dress like my dad, which is why I have this awesome beard. Yeah. And to where it was like, I just wanted to look like my dad. And growing up, I've kept that close to where it was like, I want to look like him. And to where that culture came. And then when I got older, even more, it was to where now I started hanging around people that were businessmen. So they had suits, ties, all these things. And I was like, well, I want to look successful. Mm-hmm. So then it changed from that culture to now a business culture. And people are like, well, people like you don't dress like that. Yeah. And to where being a student council president in high school for a homeschool association, I mean, I just dressed to impress. I wore suit, tie every time we had a meeting. Mm-hmm. And then coming into college now, I was like, okay, I'm going to wear suit and tie freshman year. Had the whole thing going.
Were you wearing suits when I first met you at ORU?
No, that was when my suit started declining, to where I started going back to polo shirts. And
that's it. That's even another interesting point about culture, because it's based on the environment you're in a lot of times. And when you came to ORU, didn't you say you started kind of changing the way you dress to kind of look more like that culture, which was at ORU?
Yep, because at first when I came into that culture, suit and tie was very rare. You were either staff or a teacher, you were wearing suit and tie. So people would ask me, am I a professor, or all these things? And to where I had actually showed up to a professor convention, and they're like, here you go, Dr. So-and-so. And I was like, I'm not him, but okay. Yeah.
The first thing anyone at ORU ever said to me, faculty or staff, this guy walks up to me at I think it was like a whole person, a quest day or something like that. And this dude walks up to me. He's probably like 40s. And he comes up to me, and like the look on his face, he was so confused, he had to ask. And he said, are you a parent or are you a student? And I just busted out laughing. I was like, wow, just the fact that you can't tell the difference is like, I don't know whether that's a compliment or like a diss. I'm not sure.
Hey, you take it either way.
tell us what made you want to go into ministry.
Wow, that's such a long story,
Yeah,
but
condense it a little
basically
bit for
to
us.
sum it up, there was a story, Pilgrim's Progress. I had fell in love with that book when I was little, and there's a certain character in there called Evangelist.
Yeah.
And I watched a live action of Pilgrim's Progress to where the evangelist had just worn suit, tie, and every time Christian was getting off track,
Yeah.
evangelist was there telling him, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, come on, you got to stick to the past.
Wow.
And to where my idea of what I wanted to do as a minister was just to find those people that were, God was saying, go to them. They're falling off the path. And I would go there to say, hey, God loves you still, but come back.
Yeah.
And to where that was my heart on ministry, to where I just wanted to reach those people that thought they had lost it all or they couldn't get on back onto the path.
Wow. Funny story. I have to throw this in there. Actually, I don't, but it's just funny. So when I was in Bible school, 2009, Kansas City, had a girlfriend. And this is way before Elizabeth, way before I got married. Just college kid, just, doing my thing, going to Bible school, have this girlfriend. We really like each other. So we kissed. Oh my gosh. We kissed into the world. Her parents were so upset. And they were like telling their daughter, like, we don't know what's gotten into you. Like, we thought we raised you right. And I was just like, yo, it's just a kid. Anyway, the point of the story is the dad gets involved and he's like, all right, we really need to get to know you if you're going to date our daughter.
Mm-hmm.
We don't agree with the kissing thing. So we want you to meet with us every Sunday. When I met with the dad every Sunday, he was like, we're going to go through this book called Pilgrim's Progress because this is what we raised our kids on. And we want you to make sure you're on board with all this Pilgrim's Progress stuff. And I was like, dude, oh, Jesus. So whatever you got, I'm going to read it. So yeah, I went through Pilgrim's Progress with them. And honestly, I don't really remember much from it. But hey, that was Pilgrim's Progress.
There you go.
Okay, so I looked up the definition. I actually typed in race versus ethnicity. Mm-hmm. So we can kind of frame, the discussion real quick and then also have some definitions to work off of. Mm-hmm. So first thing that pops up, race refers to the concept of dividing people into groups on the basis of various sets of physical characteristics. Mm-hmm. Physical characteristics, skin color. Yeah. Ethnicity describes the culture of people in a given geographic region, including their language, heritage, religion, and customs. Yeah. So this is kind of the conversation we were having is people tend to look at others. The race thing tends to be more of a factor first, like when you first meet someone, versus ethnicity and culture. Mm-hmm. So when we first came to Woodlake, I walked through the front doors. The very first thing I heard someone say about us was, oh my gosh, there's another black guy here. And it was a black kid in the youth group that said it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, it's kind of funny. Yeah. But that's the first thing you notice about people. Sometimes, a lot of the time, is skin color, especially if you're a minority. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, there's another black guy here. And we tend to, and this is what we were talking about last week, you tend to make assumptions based on the skin color of a person. Yeah. And the conversation we were having last week was, it's really, you should be not necessarily judging, but like getting your information about a person more based on the ethnicity and culture instead of the skin color. Yes. So for example, I should never look at another black guy, or no one should ever look at a black guy and think like, oh man, he loves rap. Yep. And like chicken and Kool-Aid. Like chicken and Kool-Aid are great.
Hey, it's good, but still.
But you can't, that's more of the culture thing. Yeah. Because you can totally be a white person and you've been raised in the environment where chicken and Kool-Aid are a thing. Yeah. I should stop using that example. But it is a stereotypical thing. So I want you to tell us real quick, it's really hard to condense these things down into very short stories, but have you ever experienced racism in the church? Tell us about it.
So it happened a while back to where after our home church, we just kind of left and we went around to other churches to where I had one of their pastors. It was one of their youth pastors to where he had came up to me and was basically telling me like, "Hey, we're more worried about like you go talk to your own people. You can go do this thing with your own people." Like, and to where I had just took to where I was thinking my own people.
Yeah.
Thinking we're all the body of Christ to where
Yeah.
we're all just one people to where I didn't realize until I got older. I started thinking, well, what does this mean? And
Yeah.
to where from other families to where they would look at me differently because of the skin color I had to where they would think, well, they would clinch to things more carefully or they'd be careful where I was around and
Yeah.
they would say dumb things to her. Well, we can't let you in the office because they said kids would steal stuff or to her thinking, well, there was other kids going in there getting stuff, so why can't I go?
Yeah.
And to where I piece by piece little things of, oh, that's how it came.
Yeah, and that's tricky because there's always the rule of, okay, don't make assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume, don't think that you know what someone else is thinking or feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But as a person of color, what I've realized is rarely is someone who is racist or stereotyping or discriminating, so on and so forth. Rarely are they going to say, "Hey, I'm discriminating against you.
Yeah.
I'm racist."
Yes.
And so what I've realized, and especially talking to other people of color, other minorities, is that people of color tend to have this skill that they've developed over time based on experiences
Mm-hmm.
where they can kind of figure out if someone is racist, if someone is being discriminatory or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the thing I was telling, actually one of our other church members, one of my friends, he's a white guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling him about this experience I had when I was in junior high, where I was dating a white girl. Make a really long story short, I was dating a white girl. The dad was racist.
Mm-hmm.
She told me, "Hey, my dad is racist.
Yeah.
But I still want to date you." We had this encounter where he finds out we're together at her aunt's house.
Mm-hmm. He
He gets in his car and is coming over and tells his sister, the aunt, like, "You better tell him to get out of there because I'm on my way over there." Her aunt gets us in the car, and basically, for all intents and purposes, we have a car chase because she throws her niece and me in her car and we take off. The dad pulls up as we're leaving and he's like following us and he's like calling her like, "Stop the car. Like, I know he's in there. Stop the car." And she's like, "I'm not stopping."
Mm-hmm.
So it's a car chase.
Yeah.
And I'm like down in the back of the car on the floorboard, like trying to hide, but he knows I'm in there.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first encounters I had. So I was like, okay, this is now part of my experience. This is now part of like what's shaping my identity and my view of the world.
Yeah.
Is this white guy who's mad I'm dating his daughter and he's chasing her.
Yeah.
So over time, the little encounters and the little experiences that I've had personally, and you're probably the same way,
Mm-hmm.
you start to like, you question like, okay, I'm in this environment where I'm clearly the minority.
Yes.
Is everybody here cool? Is anyone not?
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, it's the people who go out of their way to avoid me.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the question mark starts to pop up of like, okay, is this an issue? And then as time progresses, what I've noticed is like, okay, either they think I have a third arm or something, or there might be an issue.
I mean, dealing with people like that it's very giving them the benefit of the doubt to where I've encountered it a few times to where I'll try to engage with somebody or back in the day to where I didn't think color was a big thing. My parents never raised me on that. They said everyone's equal. Yeah. If they do it, you could do it. To where in high school, I was talking to a parent's girl, and the girl that I was interested in, I was talking to her parents, and the mom would subtly throw in, like, my daughter we were followed around by a black person in the mall, or just subtle things to where it was like, what does that have to do with me? To where I tell people, I'm not black. I said, to where I've had that assumption made to where people are like, oh, since you're dark skinned, you're black. And it's like, no, I'm Hispanic. It's totally different culture.
Yeah.
To where it was that assumption. They're like, well, if you're brown or you're darker skin, then you're associated with black too. Where it's like, no, it's like, I said, and more than anything, I said I was raised in a cowboy town. I said it's either Hispanic or white, and I said my dad tells us all the time. He's like, you're white. I'm sorry. There's nothing more about it. And
what he means is he's talking about the ethnicity side of it,
and
the culture
he's
side
like,
of it, right?
It's the culture too. To where I tell people it's the culture that's a big factor. To where I said I like a bit of rap. I said, but I enjoy country. I said I enjoy a variety of music. To where it's the culture I was raised into. It was like, no, it's not this. I said I dress like a white guy. I said, and to where it's that simple notion of, well, since he's colored, then he must be this.
Yeah.
To where it's the race. They're like everything in race and culture are mixed together, but it's like, no, they're two separate things. Of if you get to know a person, I was actually having a conversation with a few friends to where I was telling them, I said, it's when you get to know the person, you get to know the culture. I said, you find out who they really are. And that's the thing.
So basically, if a person wants to, okay, let's say a person of color walks into your church, and I have to do this too.
Mm-hmm.
I am a black guy. My dad was black. My mom's Native American.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like as much of a minority as you can get. When I see a new person of color walk into our church, my first thing that I think, and I think the first thing everybody should think, whether you're a pastor, a leader, a regular church attender, is I need to get to know that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because that person is bringing in certain experiences, a certain perspective,
Mm-hmm.
a certain story that I do not know.
Yeah.
It is not, oh, there's a black person, I bet we can like listen to rap together.
Yeah.
And like it's never that.
Yeah.
So when you have a conversation with a person, what you're getting to know is you're not trying to dig deeper into race. You're trying to dig deeper into ethnicity, culture, stories, experiences, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So have you ever had a conversation with a person, you're telling them about yourself and they're like surprised that you have the experiences or the interests that you have?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny to when people find out I'm homeschooled, to where they're like,
that's a whole culture in and of itself.
They're like, oh, you're homeschooled? And I'm like, yeah. I said, they're like, you don't sound like you're homeschooled, or you talk like you're homeschooled. I said, no. I said, because it's in the culture of homeschool, you have that, you're quiet, meek, and all that. I said, it comes to the same thing with, I said, ethnicity and race.
Yeah.
To where I said, you already categorized homeschoolers as homeschoolers, so they're shy and meek. And I said, so then you think somebody, a skin color, they like rap music, Kool-Aid, grape soda, all that stuff. To where you're thinking, well, they're that. But it's like, no. I said, it's when you get to know them, and to where I tell people, yeah, I take interest in. I said, when I was little, I dressed like a cowboy. Yeah. I said I wanted to be a cowboy. And they're like, really? I said, yeah. I said,
and they're shocked at that.
And
because, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're looking at your skin color and they're thinking, okay, the person with this skin color is not a cowboy.
Yeah.
But then when they find out that's your culture, ethnicity, they're like, wow, really?
Yeah. And that's the thing, to where I tell people I grew up in that, and to where it's that assumption that they think, oh, he has to be like this. He has to, that stereotype, to where they're like this.
Mm-hmm. But really, it's, you just need to have a conversation with someone and get to know them.
And I think one thing is simple. If you're trying to, I heard from a comedian one time, to where if you want to be cool with black people, I said, just nod your head like, what's up? And they'll do the same thing back. They're like, what's up? If not, I said, you have the famous cowboy tip and hat, to when I said, whenever I meet anybody else, I always nod my head. I'm like, how are you? And then they nod back.
Yeah.
If not,
that's hilarious.
I said, it's a simple what's up or hello.
Yeah.
Or how you doing, man?
Yeah. And that's very accurate. And that can be, I think that's more of the cultural thing, ethnicity thing. Because I'm thinking of one black guy in particular I know, where if you gave him a nod like that, he would, or like that whole what's up, he would not respond that way.
Yeah.
Because of his culture and the way he was raised, is like he's very proper, and he would probably give me the downward nod, and I'll be like, all right, you don't do the upward nod, you do the downward nod. So tell me this. I need more coffee. Tell me, okay, let's reframe this. As a minister,
Okay.
as a leader in the church who leads persons of all colors, in all backgrounds and ethnicities, what is your response to someone, let's say in the church, maybe not this church, just in general, someone in the church who you suspect might be racist or discriminatory, and who's, it's probably not confirmed, but who's giving you all the signs of someone who might be racist and is acting very consistent with someone who doesn't want to interact with you because of your color? What is your response in your approach to someone like that?
So that's a great question. And the experiences that I've had, it would be more just simple hello, like a constant flow of, hey, how you doing? Shaking their hand. And if not, if they pull back from it, that's on them. You've already extended your hand out, to where I've met tons of people like that, to where I stick my hand out and they'll blow by it, to where it's not on me. I did my part, but now it's on them. And especially a fellow Christian, to where, I mean, the golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated, to where I've put myself out there like, hey, I'm fine. I got nothing against you. But to where if you have something, that's between you and Jesus. And I mean, it's not our part to go and tell them like, hey, you can't be racist, or hey, you can't think that way. But more of the questions of asking, well, why do you think that? And to a majority of them, they were raised like that. They were taught. And to where, I mean, I've had few conversations with a few people to where I just ask, well, why do you think that way? Well, because this experience happened to them, and usually it just has to do with something happened to them with the opposite color, to where it's like, oh, okay. Well, sorry that happened, but I'm not like that. And I mean, it's just those simple conversations of having, and it's not a sprint, but a marathon with those people.
And I have a very similar approach, because I'm like, this is not, if I've ever picked up on any vibes like that, I'm like, this is not on me. This is on them. And if someone has an issue towards me because of my skin color, and honestly, a lot of times because I have tattoos too, I'm like, you know what? Like, there's nothing I can do to probably change your mind in this moment, but I'm still going to act in a Christ-like manner towards you. And it's just not going to change who I am. And if a person is just kind of have it made up in their mind, they're going to continue to avoid me, they're going to continue to just not have anything to do with me, then, you know, I can pray for you and I can still be a pastor towards you or your family or your friends or whatever. But I've realized, like, you can't just change someone like that. But that doesn't have to change who I am and how I act.
And that's one very important thing too, where my parents taught me, stuck it in my head, to where they grew up in that time of racism. Mom can tell you stories that they still had the color and white fountains, to where they taught us, it's not, you're judging nobody on their skin color, but the characters, the fruit that they bear. That is what you judge somebody on. To where I tell people, I give people the benefit of the doubt until they cross that line in it. Where it's like, okay, this is what I'm holding you accountable to. Not because you're white, not because you're black, not because what you are, but because of what you've shown me. That is what I'll hold you responsible to. And especially in the church, to where it's like, now I'm holding you to a higher standard, because that's how I want to be held. If I'm stepping out of line, it's like, I want somebody to say, hey, you shouldn't be saying that, or you shouldn't be acting like that. And that's one thing, to where it's very easy to lose that, like how you're saying that, you get caught up in it, to where you lose that identity, to that core, to where you're like, well, if they're doing it, then I got to do it back to them. But it's like, no, it's, you remind yourself that you're made in the image of Christ. You are the embodiment of Christ, where it's like, it's about everyone. It's not just about my agenda, your agenda, but helping everyone unite, be in unity together, family.
For sure. To put a bow on this, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. There are so many implications within that statement, but I believe that's the approach we should have. Love people as we would love ourselves. And that includes people who may be discriminatory towards you because of the color of your skin.
Yeah.
But I believe that's what we're called to, and I believe that's what the church is called to. The interesting thing about this to me is I'm looking at it from the perspective of a pastor who is trying to help non-minorities learn how to interact with minorities, and vice versa. Because a lot of times minorities will come in to a predominantly white church and they're like, I don't know how to function.
Yeah.
The music's different. The people are different. The attitude's different. The vibe's different. So as a person who is always thinking about how to bridge that gap, it all goes back to just having conversations with people and getting to know them. But the other thing that I've realized is you can't ever, on both sides, you can't ever make an assumption about someone based on race, based on the color of their skin. That is a very one-dimensional way to look at somebody.
Yes.
And when you start to actually get to know people and hear their story, first and foremost, just the idea of culture, ethnicity is very three-dimensional. Like, there's a lot to be learned with that. Like, for instance, if you put up the subject of cowboy church, like there you could probably write books on books on books just on cowboy church. So there's that factor of like, okay, I need to understand the culture. But then you add to that, and what I'm hearing you say is people are always changing. Not only do you need to understand people's cultural background, but also keep in mind people are always changing and evolving and learning new things and making adjustments. So, question for you. What would your response be to someone in the church, a Christian person who is like, I just don't know how to relate to people of color? What do I do?
I mean, it's simple. Comes very simple. Get to know them. I mean, the one thing I was actually talking to a few of our interns here is that I was asking them, the only way how I get to know you is having these conversations, find out what you like, what you don't like, to where I can find, okay, maybe I can relate, maybe I can't. You find those people that you want to keep in your life, to where it's like, okay, I want to relate to you, so I'm going to learn about sports. I'm going to learn about agriculture. I'm going to learn so I can be like, oh, so when we have a conversation, it's not just, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
And then that awkward silence.
Yeah. That's, I agree 100%. And what I've realized is people are so complex. Relationships are so complex. Culture, ethnicity, it's all so complex that the only way to do it is through relationships and through conversations and a genuine curiosity to get to know someone. So you're saying the answer, the thing that you do when you don't know how to relate to someone of a different skin color, or they're a minority and you're not a minority, is just talk to people.
Yeah.
Just get to know them. Really tricky question.
Okay.
Really tricky scenario. So a lot of this conversation has been more about being the minority and learning and almost like educating non-minorities, I'll say it that way, how to interact with minorities, people of color, minorities or people of color. But what about the person of color or the minority who they don't know how to function and they feel out of place in the predominantly white church? They feel uncomfortable, they feel unwelcome for whatever reason, whether it's just perceived or they've actually had some sort of encounter or experience that gives them reason to feel uncomfortable. What do you say to those people? What would your advice be? Let's say one of your friends came with you and your friend is the same color as you, or your friend is a black guy or something. Like, man, I just don't know. This is a white church.
Yeah.
I've heard so many people say that, my friends. So for someone to say that's a white church, I don't fit in there, what's your response to someone like that?
How I would tell them is, well, you can't judge them right off the bat, to where you don't know them.
Yeah.
And you don't know their characteristics, to where a majority of the people I've gotten to know here, and I'm like, wow, you're really nice people.
Yeah.
And to where I would tell them, don't look for it.
Yeah.
Don't try to get
That's
that.
Great.
Don't try to get that lens on, to where you're trying to find their flaws, or you're trying to find that slip up for them.
Yeah, or you're trying to find like, they are racist.
Yeah.
Like, because you'll whatever you're looking for, you're gonna find it.
Yes.
And you won't stop until you find it. So that's great advice.
And that's one thing too where I would tell them, come and have fellowship. Don't try to look for, oh, they're being racist or they're being discriminatory or all these things. I mean, if you try to do that, I mean, you'll never find the true meaning of the body of Christ. To where, I mean, the thing is, like I was saying earlier, you'll have your disagreements. You won't like certain people, but in the Bible, it does call us to love one another. It never
Yep.
said we had to like each other, but it said
Yeah.
we had to love them.
That's good.
And that's one thing to where I would tell them, like, get over yourself.
Yeah.
To where you can't let what happened to you determine everything that you're going to see in the church.
Man, that's good.
And that's one thing that I've had to live on, to where it's like, I can't judge them right off the back, to where I could have came in and been thinking, well, they don't like me, they're discriminatory, or they just look at me different, or all these things. I could have thought like that, and I wouldn't be here right now. But to where I had to put down my pride, put down my hurt, and be like, God, show me what you're trying to do through these people, because they're your people.
Yeah.
And I want to be a part of the body.
Yeah.
And to where I've had to just throw away that lens of, oh, they're being racist, or, oh, they're being this.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, it's like, it doesn't matter what's going to happen, because I'm not doing it for them. I'm not trying to please them.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to please my Father. And
Man, that's good.
and that's one thing I tell them, is like, get over yourself.
Yeah.
To where, stop trying to look for their flaws,
Yeah.
because you have them just as bad as them.
Mm-hmm.
To where now you're being the one who's being discriminatory. You're now being the one who's racist.
Man, that's good. That's so good.
This church has its own culture, to where it's like,
Yeah.
if you're trying, you can't change culture like that to where they adjust to you. To where I've had to take my pride down and been like, okay, how does this church work?
Yeah.
To where it's like, okay, let me edify it, and let me not take away, but let me give back to it. In your comfortability, you have to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
For sure.
you can't just sit there thinking they're going to come to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing to where I thought so long was, people have to come to me. People have to come to me.
Nope.
But it's to where God's like, no, it's like, you go to them.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
you have to get to know them.
Man, some of the best experiences I've had in the church, as far as relationship building, has always come on the other side of awkwardness.
Mhm.
Dude, the first thing I was ever invited to, Brandon invited me to this young adult hangout. And young adults was such a small group at the time.
Yep.
And honestly, I stuck out like a sore thumb. I didn't know anyone. I was brand new. And for me, it was the most awkward thing in the world.
Yep.
But my relationship with Brandon has grown so much. He's like one of my best friends. And that came on the other side of awkwardness, to where if I let the awkwardness like scare me away,
Yeah.
that's a friendship in a relationship that I wouldn't have, because I just let the awkwardness like paralyze me.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, the awkward, like if you can embrace the awkwardness and endure it, there's always good things on the other side of it. I
And-
think.
It's like this. If I went to Mexico, I would have to learn Spanish. I'd have to learn all these things, because that's their culture.
Yeah.
And I can't come over there telling them, y'all need to speak Spanish, y'all need to speak English, y'all need to understand, you need the food I eat, all this
Yeah.
stuff, because it's an invasion to their culture.
Yeah.
But to where, coming over here, it's like, hey guys, you got to learn our culture.
Mhm.
You can have your culture still, but learn ours, so that we're not butting heads
Yeah.
over certain things. Where it's like, if you have that, it's like, yeah, we respect your culture,
Yeah.
but you're coming into ours, so respect ours.
That's good.
And that's the same thing like with churches, to where if you're going in with this thing of, I'm gonna change them, or they gotta conform to me,
Yeah, gotta adapt to me.
and it's like, no, it's to where you have to adapt to them,
Yeah.
because they've already had this 10-20 years down the
Yeah.
road, and they've already been like this too.
Yeah. To me, too, the best picture of the church is not when one culture conforms to the other,
Mhm.
but when there's a relationship built and the cultures are blended.
Yeah.
Because that's what the kingdom looks like.
Yeah.
It's not this like American culture over everything else,
Yeah.
but it's the blending of these cultures, these ethnicities, these races.
Yeah.
That's a picture of God's redemptive plan in
And-
the world.
And I mean, coming into the church too, I mean, with me, it was like, okay, I'm new here. I'm nervous. Am I gonna mess up? Are they not gonna like me? But to where I'm bringing what I have to the table. It's like a big old feast. It's like
Yeah.
a potluck.
Yeah.
You're bringing your best dish to
Exactly.
it, and you're just trying to add to it. You're not trying to be like, oh guys, look, this is what I did. But it's
Yeah.
like, here, like try some.
As a minority and as someone who talks to a lot of other minorities, is we tend to feel like, well, this is a predominantly white church, so my voice doesn't fit or my culture doesn't fit. When really, we need to be loud and proud
Yeah.
about where we come from culturally, because we want to add it to the pot,
Yeah.
so to speak. And when you add it to the pot, but not say like, oh, I'm different, I'm going to stay over here. But when you add it to the pot, you're actually making your church look a lot more like the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so don't just hold yourself back and think I don't fit, but add to the pot.
It's okay being different.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about, we are all made in the image of God, to where it's, we have been given that specific differences but similarities.
Yeah.
And that's one thing to where I've just stepped into where it's, okay, I don't fit in,
Yeah.
but I'm going to work in.
Yeah.
And that's one thing too, where it's just, a lot of it is getting over like all the things that have happened, your stories, your experiences, to where you're not saying, well, they're all the same, or
Yeah.
it's going to be like this again. But to where it's like, everybody's new. Just think of it as a new movie. You've never watched it before. You don't know
Yeah.
what you're going into, or a new TV series, and you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you're just going in with that thing of what's happening next.
Yeah. That's good. Hey, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate you.
I enjoyed it.